Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain an action comedy movie called Blind Fury. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie opens in 1972, towards the end of the Vietnam War. The battlefield is littered with dead bodies that lay near a crashed helicopter. An American soldier, Nick Parker, seems to have survived the crash, but lost his eyesight. He wades aimlessly through a thick marsh, trying to find his friend and fellow soldier, Frank Devereaux. Unfortunately, he falls into a net and is captured by the local people. A few hours later, Nick wakes up in a Vietnamese village. Instead of being in a hostile environment, he is greeted by friendly locals who treat his eyes and wounds using herbal medicines. They feed him, look after him, and a local man even takes him under his wing. When Nick's injuries heal, the local man starts training him in hand-to-hand and sword combat. Gradually, after several months of continuous training, Nick develops a keen sense of hearing. This allows him to master the art of figuring out his surroundings and intercepting approaching danger. 20 years later, Nick lives in the US as a retired veteran. He expertly uses his cane to do various tasks, and it also acts as a sheath for his sword. One afternoon at a diner, we see a group of drunk guys misbehaving with a woman. Her purse accidentally drops near Nick's leg, who is there for lunch. Since our hero cannot stand injustice, he steps forward and thrashes all the bullies using his quick reflexes. Conversely, life has not been so kind to Frank Devereaux. He married a woman named Lynn, with whom he had a son, Billy. The family initially had a comfortable life as Frank worked as a chemical engineer in Reno, Nevada. However, he started frequenting a Las Vegas casino run by the drug lord Kevin McCready. Soon enough, he developed a gambling addiction, which led to insurmountable debt. To pay back the money, he started working as an underground chemist for McCready, creating raw materials for drugs. He also left his wife for a waitress, Annie, who worked in the same casino. Sounds like Frank made his bed. After a few years, Frank grew tired of making drugs that destroyed the lives of several people. He refused to work, but was forced to continue until his debt got cleared. Currently, McCready's henchmen hang Frank upside down from the top of their casino. They threaten him to produce a large batch of designer drugs because the casino is gearing up for a massive deal down the week. When Frank refuses yet again, McCready comes up with a cunning idea: kidnap his ex-wife and son and use them to force him into working. He probably should have kidnapped the waitress, but I guess the ex will do in a pinch. Elsewhere, Nick arrives at Lynn's home, hoping to find his old friend there. The latter gladly invites him inside and they have a conversation over tea. Lynn reveals that she's now divorced, and Frank lives on the other end of the nation, in Reno. She also claims that he hasn't been in contact for years. At that moment, a loud knock interrupts their conversation, and Lynn goes to attend the door. Two policemen then barge inside, asking to meet Billy Devereaux. They claim that the young kid is a potential eyewitness for a crime and want to talk to him. Minutes later, they are joined by a big guy named Slag, who is actually the right-hand man of McCready. Nick senses that something is off, so he interrupts the policemen and asks them for a warrant. However, before he can get a response, Slag grabs Lynn and holds her by the throat. Billy also arrives at the scene and rushes to his mother's aid, but the big guy pushes her away and slams Billy into a wall, knocking him unconscious. He then fatally shoots Lynn, causing her to drop to the floor. This enrages Nick so much that he quickly brings out his sword and wreaks havoc. Despite being blind, he easily finishes off the corrupt policemen with his flashy moves. He also manages to injure Slag, but the latter somehow escapes from there because he'll be in the third act and it'll be awesome. Now that the danger is over, Nick rushes to check on Lynn, but it is already too late. She asks him to take care of her son. "I'm not doing that," says Nick, before succumbing to her injuries. Shortly after, Billy regains consciousness and Nick tells him that they're going to Nevada to meet his father. When the young kid asks about his mother, Nick lies, saying that she is still at their home. The two then make their way to a bus station and get tickets for a long-distance journey across America. On the other hand, Frank reads about the death of his ex-wife and the disappearance of his son in the newspaper. He knows this is McCready's doing, so he reluctantly agrees to resume work. Meanwhile, Billy and Nick's journey does not get off to a good start. It is evident that the young boy does not like his travel companion and even mocks his blindness at times. That night, he tries to check Nick's wallet to see what's inside. The veteran easily catches him in the act, but lets him continue anyway. To Billy's surprise, he finds a black and white photograph of his father and Nick from their army days. This makes him curious, so he asks Nick how he lost his eyesight. In a flashback scene, Nick, Frank, and their infantry celebrate their last day in Vietnam before being sent back home. However, in the middle of their celebration, their base comes under attack by the Vietnamese rebels. They design a plan where Frank would provide cover while Nick would sneak close to the enemy line to take them out, but their idea backfires as the Vietnamese forces manage to ambush them from both sides. In the heat of the moment, Frank runs for cover, leaving Nick to fend for himself. This is when a mortar explodes nearby, sending him flying. Nick is permanently blinded by the incident, but he still doesn't hold any grudges over Frank. In the present, the duo's bus stops for breakfast at a gas station near a vast cornfield. Billy quickly runs to a public phone booth to contact his mother back home, but Nick stops him and pulls him aside to chat. He then finally confesses about his mother's death. Upon hearing this, Billy feels betrayed, as he was earlier told that his mother was safe back home. Unable to bear the loss, he runs right into the cornfield. Nick does his best to follow the kid.
Billy, no! There's weird children and mazes in there!
But soon loses him among the thick plants. Unfortunately, Slag and his goons have been following them, and he manages to grab Billy. He takes the kid to a makeshift hut in the middle of the field, while his men try to find and kill Nick. But once again, the experienced veteran proves too much for the kidnappers. He expertly kills them one by one before making his way to the hut. Slag notices him from afar and tries to blast him using his shotgun, but misses each shot. Good hearing means you can dodge bullets after all. Just as he reloads his weapon, Nick sneaks under the hut and slashes one of the pillars holding its weight. The structure crumbles down, and Nick swings his sword at Slag a few times. He then grabs the boy and runs away from the cornfield. Unfortunately, Slag survives the attack, as he had been wearing a protective vest underneath his shirt that gives him plus 30 resist to blunt force trauma, and also because he's going to be in the third act and he'll be badass. The news of this failure reaches back to MacCready, who grows more and more irate by the minute. Frank has been working overtime to produce the large batch of drugs only because he thinks his son has been captured, but in reality, MacCready neither has the little kid nor the blind man who has been creating all sorts of trouble. In the meantime, Nick and Billy miss the bus, so they spend the night by the riverside. During this, the young boy mourns the loss of his mother and cries his heart out. Nick feels very bad as well, but he cannot cry as the tear glands in his eyes were destroyed in the mortar attack. That's not funny, I'm sorry. The following morning, the duo takes a lift and arrives in front of Frank's home in Reno. An emotionally distraught Billy does not want to go in because he thinks his father hates him, but Nick teaches him to forgive past mistakes and give life a chance. The two then knock on the home's front door and Annie opens it. She warmly greets them and asks them to come in. However, as soon as Nick steps inside the house, he realizes that something's off. His intuition turns out to be correct, as two of MacCready's men, Lyle and Tector, are waiting for them.
We've been waiting for y'all. Name's Lyle. This here's my boy Tector.
Lyle swiftly knocks our hero out, while Tector ties up the kid. They then load the two on the back of their van and leave with Annie. However, it is clear that Annie was forced into doing this, and she did not expect things to get violent. As the van makes its way towards Las Vegas, Nick regains his consciousness. He hears a loud noise when Tector chucks his cane out on the highway. It bounces on the asphalt and falls by the roadside, prompting the veteran to ask Billy to remember the whereabouts of the place. Springing into action, he guides Billy to grab a lighter from his back pocket. The duo then sets fire to a jute sack kept nearby, creating unbearable smoke inside the van. Annie notices them and distracts the two kidnappers until the smoke reaches the driver's cabin. Seconds later, Lyle is forced to stop the vehicle and check what's happening in the back. Using this opportunity, Nick blindsides both the attackers and knocks them down on the road. Annie then quickly grabs the steering wheel and drives towards Reno, with Nick and Billy safe in the van. Shortly after, as they stop to search for Nick's cane, Lyle and Tector regain consciousness. They immediately jack an elderly couple's car and head towards Reno. Things go from bad to worse for Nick, as he does find his cane but accidentally breaks Annie's glasses. At this moment, the bad guys show up, prompting Nick to take the steering wheel while Billy helps him navigate. A wild chase then ensues through the busy streets, which ends with Nick slamming the pursuer's car into oncoming traffic. Although Lyle and Tector survive the crash, they lose their targets for the time being. Elsewhere, Annie takes Nick and Billy to an RV RV owned by her friend Colleen. The trio rest there for the night and recover their strength. The following morning, Nick decides to go to Las Vegas all by himself to save his old friend from the clutches of McCready. However, before he can leave, Billy wakes up and begs him to stay. He even calls him uncle, a sign that he has started to like him. However, Nick asks him to be brave and promises to come back with Frank. In the next scene, Nick arrives in Las Vegas and makes his way to McCready's casino. There, he overhears the drug lord talking to his minions about going to a ski resort for an important deal. McCready also reveals his plan to kill Frank after midnight, because by then, he will have made enough drugs. Later, as the deputy manager of the casino, Vince, retires to the penthouse, Nick sneaks nearby and carefully remembers the entrance code. He then goes to the casino and wins game after game, attracting a huge crowd. Soon enough, the casino security comes by and proposes that Nick puts all his chips in a game of roulette. In reality, he has already rigged the game using an electronic device. Nick falls for the trick and ends up losing all his money. However, his keen sense of hearing catches the beeping noise in the security guard's pocket. In the blink of an eye, he slashes the guard's pocket with his sword, exposing the device to the entire crowd. This causes a riot to break out, and Nick uses the chaos to slide away towards the penthouse entrance. He then uses the passcode that he had earlier remembered and makes his way upstairs. On the top floor is an extensive penthouse that is crawling with security at every corner. However, Nick manages to use his elite skills and kills several men before making his way into the office of the deputy manager. Once inside, he places his sword on Vince's neck and forces him to reveal Frank's whereabouts. The latter reluctantly explains that his friend is working in a lab on the other side of the lobby. Now that Nick has all the information he needs, he knocks Vince out and rushes out of there. In the next scene, the two friends finally reunite, and Frank explains that he has always carried the guilt of destroying Nick's life because of his foolish actions in Vietnam. "That's okay, Frank, you weren't a fool, you were just a pussy," says Nick. But the latter responds that he holds no grudges and wants his friend to reunite with his son. Before leaving the lab, Frank takes the key ingredient in McCready's drugs and destroys all the equipment. The two then avoid the security and head to Colleen's RV. However, instead of a father-son reunion, they find Colleen dead, Billy and Annie kidnapped, and a note directed at them. It instructs them to bring the drugs to McCready's mountain penthouse in exchange for Billy and Annie. Fully aware that it's an ambush, Nick and Frank arm themselves with homemade napalm bombs. They make their way to the mountaintop in a cable car and use all their military training to kill all of McCready's men. Following this, they rush towards the penthouse and find McCready holding Billy and Annie at gunpoint. The villain is fully prepared and has hired a Japanese assassin to get rid of Nick. You know he's good at swords because he's Japanese. Hell yeah, the 80s. A brutal sword fight then ensues between the two, but the blind veteran eventually wins by zapping the assassin in a hot tub. All of a sudden, Slag sneaks in and shoots Nick in the shoulder, dropping him to the floor. He then starts taunting him for being blind and clueless, but this only gives Nick enough time to hurl his sword at Slag, impaling him brutally. I knew it would be badass. McCready then tries to interfere, but he's stopped in his tracks by Frank. The two men fall to the floor, jostling over a shotgun. McCready somehow manages to grab the weapon, but then he accidentally fires it and unalives himself. As for Nick, he grabs his sword and mercilessly hacks Slag, finishing him off for good. In the aftermath of this event, Frank is reunited with his family, and they leave for San Francisco. Meanwhile, Nick drops his ticket, choosing not to go with them. Billy follows him and begs him to come along, but Nick has already made up his mind, and he asks the boy to take care of his family. In the final scene, he crosses the street and vanishes as a bus passes him because being blind gives you teleportation. Saddened by his departure, Billy throws a toy dinosaur off the bridge, where Nick catches it. The movie ends as Billy calls out to him one last time, saying that he'll miss him a lot. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.